in the first week, in the first lesson, the teacher briefly introduced us to programming. So in the beginning, he talked about what exactly programming is. For example, we learned that programming initially was created to solve hard math problems, and then later on, it went on just to solve any problem any problem faster than humans. Later on, we learned the basics, like for example, what is commenting in the C programming, and then what's library, for example, Studio. It's used so that we can input and output data on C programming, and then the main function where all the statements and the functions are inside this function. And then when the function it's ended, we use the return zero. And we also learn the different types of errors, the syntax error, the logical error, the runtime errors. Syntax error is basically the errors that happen, the errors that happen because the rules weren't applied properly. Later on, we moved on to learning about flowcharts. Flowcharts are basically the diagrams that are used to describe the flow of the program. For example, the flowcharts have different symbols. For example, the input is that kind of symbol and stuff like that. And there are three types of flowcharts. For example, the sequence. There's no if and else statement. There's no loop. So it's very basic like this. And then there is the one for if and else statement. If the condition is true, it goes to one program, and then if the condition is false, it goes to another way. And the loop is anyway, this one is if and else. This is also if and else. If it's true, it goes this way. If it's not, it goes the other way. And then there is the loop one, where it keeps on repeating the function until the condition is wrong. So yeah, that's the flowchart. So next we learned about the variables. Variables are basically, in the variables you equal it to some variable. For example, before any program you have to put them under a variable. For the int, this variable is for any integer. It cannot be any decimal point. It has to be a whole number. And for char, it's any variable that's a character. And for double, it's the one that you use for decimals and any floating numbers, and also float is the same. And character, yeah, it can also be used for string. And next, you use printf to print the variables that you would like to print. For example, you can use this technique where for the integers, you can use the %i or %d, and for character %c, and so on. And when you want to scanf, where you want the user to input, you have to use the %i and then the end symbol. So in the next week, we learned about structured programming. To briefly go through this, because I already went through this, there is a sequence structure where basically a set of steps goes after each other. And then there is the selection structure where if the condition is true, it goes one set of steps, or if the condition is false, then it takes another route of another steps. And then there is the repetition, where a set of steps keeps repeating until the condition is false. So in the second week, we did the if and else statement. So this one is the selection statement, where basically if the condition is true, then it goes to statements, the one root of statements, set of statements. And then if the condition is false, then goes another route where it takes different statements, different route of steps. So as you can see, when it was true, it took these steps, and if it's not, then it goes another way. And then there is the relational operators. Basically, these are used for the conditions. This is less than, this is equal to, or less than, bigger than, equal to, bigger than, equal to, or it's not equal to. Next is the repetition statements, the repetition structure. So, for example, okay, there are three types of repetition structure. There's the while, do while, and then the for loop. And this is the while one. So, for example, this is the declaration of the variable I equals to 0, and then this is the condition while I is smaller than 3. This is the statements that follow through if this condition is true. For example, it's gonna print I, year I, and then you increment I. So this will keep repeating on until the condition is false. So this is one type of repetition structure. And then another repetition structure is do while. So basically, what's the difference between this and while is this one, the statements first follow through and then check if the condition, and then check condition. If the condition is true, then it will keep on repeating the statements until the condition is false. So the main difference is basically the statements first follow through and then check if it's correct, and the other way in only the while one, it first checks the condition and then it does the statements. This is the for loop. So it's also very similar, but a bit different. All the condition and then the increment and everything happens just in the beginning. So this is stating the variable I equals to 0, and this is the condition that checks before going through the loop, and then this is the increment. So all this happens. First it checks that I equals to 0. It states that I is equal to 0, and then it checks if I is more than 10, and it will print the dot, and then it will increment. So this will keep on repeating until I is not smaller than 10. And then the latest week, what we have learned is arrays. So basically what array is, it's a variable where you can put more than one value. So for example, in this array, you can put 12 values. Like you can put, so in num array, you can put 12 different values of integers because it's an int. But the thing is, you don't have to put only integers. You can even use characters. And then this is how you enter the location of the data. So car, Mitch, 5. So this basically refers to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay, there's 5 of them. So if you want to enter the first one, you put car, Mitch, 1. So then you enter this value, and then you can change this value or whatever you want to do, you can do. Another important thing we learned about arrays is you can do two-dimensional array. The one I showed before is one-dimensional array. In the two-dimensional array, again, it's also good because you have more options of putting values. So in the other one you only had 5, and this one, you can have more rows. The other one only had one row. And then in here, when you want to access the location of the one data, you have to use 2 indexes. So the index 3 means it's the third row, and then 4, it's the fourth column. Okay, thank you. This is Dastan, and this was my reflection on what I have learned so far in introduction programming.